at the end of the day, the Prime Minister has got to find something to say to them, stick with me and keep hope. My understanding is that he's going to go into that meeting and say, we won't win if we're divided. We need to refocus our attention on attacking the Labour Party.
Kate, your thoughts on Prime Minister's question time, the latest verbal pie fight between the leaders in the House of Commons. What did you make of it?
It was a real mood of absolutely nothing new to say, I'm going to be honest with you. I was in the press gallery, as I always am, and, often these things are a little bit dull to start with, and then they get exciting. It was fair to say that both men had run out of things to say to each other. Keir Starmer went for a best hits, best sort of... he could mangle together from, the economy to the NHS to all of the things that he thinks are going wrong with the country. And the Prime Minister gave his standard Labour has no plan answer. And they repeated that 6 times over. And pretty much everybody had stopped listening by the end of it. So it wasn't an illuminating session. It was marked by the fact that actually both sides, Labour and Tory benches, were not as full as they usually are. MPs were leaving before the end. And there was a real sense of, can we really keep this going for another 7 or whatever months until we get to October?
So more of this feeling of just going round and round. And what about that meeting at Westminster? It should be starting now, private, apart from the reporters eavesdropping outside and the briefing that comes immediately after it's over. A lot of it's choreographed. And none of it was going to cover the fact there will be loyalty there and there will be loyalists there. But it doesn't disguise the fact the PM's under a lot of pressure. He's
under a huge amount of pressure, and I will be hot-footing it down to that meeting to go and stand outside the door as soon as we are done here. The Prime Minister has just gone in to the sound of cheers and banging in the last couple of seconds. And that, MPs do that. It's performative. They know that almost every journalist in the lobby is going to be standing outside and listening. And so they want to show externally that there is support. But make no mistake, there will be some very difficult moments for the Prime Minister in that meeting, which we expect will last around sort of half an hour, 45 minutes, because really the only question on everybody's lips is how on earth do we get out of this spiral? Yeah. They know, those MPs, that they are approaching the May elections. They are very deeply worried about what that means, whether they're going to lose lots of council seats. At the end of the day, the Prime Minister has got to find something to say to them, stick with me and keep hope. My understanding is that he's going to go into that meeting and say, we won't win if we're divided. We need to refocus our attention on attacking the Labour Party. But it's whether or not the party will pull together and want to do that when so many of them are leaving Westminster anyway.
Yeah. Now, the Rwanda bill, mentioned that a second ago. It's happening in the Lords. There's already been some important, interesting voting, Kate?
There has, and it's just worth me saying, just back on that Prime Minister's entrance, I mentioned to you he'd literally just walked in. I have a spy outside the door who tells me that MPs banged and cheered for a full 60 seconds. So just imagine that. I mean, that's a lot of banging and cheering, and a suggestion from my spy outside that they may well be labouring the point to suggest that there is a lot of support there for the Prime Minister. But you're right, though, not a lot of support for him in the House of Lords, where the government has lost the first of several votes on the Rwanda bill in the House of Lords tonight. Now, those votes have just started. They will probably take place up until around 7 o'clock. They lost a vote by a majority of 43, which is actually not a small majority. It's a fairly hefty defeat for the government in the Lords. That particular vote was on Labour's amendment on compliance with international law, essentially that this has to comply with international law. It means that Rwanda, the legislation will have another round of ping pong, so it will go back to the Commons. But my sources in the Lords were saying earlier on today, watch out for the margins, because if the margins on every one of these votes is quite chunky, it may well be an indication that Lords are up for a further round of ping pong. So it could go back to the Commons strips all these amendments out, and then it goes back to the Lords, and they do this all over again. And remember, every time they do this, it delays the passage of that bill further, and it could go on and on if they really want to. There will come a point where Lords will back off, but evidently off the back of that first vote, it's not today.
Right, a 46 vote defeat is quite big when you consider the Conservative peers were whipped in. Just basically, well, you can't order peers to do anything, but they were begged to come in numbers. We're going to catch up on that. Thanks, Kate. Let's talk later on. I want to now touch in with Lord Marland, who is a Conservative peer, a former government minister. Welcome to you, Lord Marland.
Good afternoon, John. I'm sitting talking to you in a corner of a space in the House of Lords. We've just voted, as Kate has just said. So forgive me if there's some interruptions, and there may well be another interruption for a vote.
There's more of those votes coming. So just on that, Lord Marland, it looks as if the government is getting, well, yet another a bit of a pasting in the House of Lords.
This is where I disagree with Kate.
Yeah, go ahead.
Far be it from me to normally disagree. 43 lost is really quite surprisingly small. I've been here a lot in the last. Well, obviously I've been here a long time, but we were often losing votes by 100. So 43 actually was surprisingly good in that the result was bad.
Yes.
But Kate's analysis is right. This will go back. We've got another 6 votes at least tonight.
Yes.
Hopefully it'll finish at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
And it'll go back to the Commons. It'll be overturned again. It'll come back. And the interesting thing is whether Labour will continue on. They're on a 3-line whip as well, as I understand. Whether Labour continue to resist this, because actually, in the end, it doesn't look great to the general public that the unelected House are being told by the elected House is being told by an unelected House that it doesn't approve it.
Yeah. So, it may well be then that this piece of legislation gets pushed off the other side of Easter, which means, maybe
You're right.
looking at maybe June before it's even possible for a flight to get in the air to Rwanda.
Well, you're a very knowledgeable observer of all this, John. So you're completely right, and it just will go on. But there is an opportunity for the Conservative Party to make political capital out of Labour's serious resistance to it if they choose.
Yeah.
Well, I find, I'm on the International Treaty Committee, so I find myself in a slightly awkward position because one of the loose ends from the bill was that the government was going to come back to us and tell us what was going to happen from a judicial point of view in Rwanda, which was something the government volunteered, and we're still yet to have a very clear picture.
Yeah.
But the overall principle, John, is whether whether this is good legislation, and the view of the government is this is what it wants to achieve.
Right. More broadly on what's going on in your party, Lord Marland, it seems as if the Conservatives are gripped in a cycle of despair. Can you see any way of breaking that cycle?
Well, I think Rishi is doing a good job, and I'm not just up here to say that. I'm not put up by them to say it either. He's got now inflation down to actually an incredibly low level, much lower than we'd hoped. That will almost certainly mean that interest rates will start to fall and should start falling, which is one of the commitments he's made. And of course, another of his commitment was to do something about this illegal immigration. And the Rwanda bill seeks to achieve that.
Yes.
I'm glad to hear that Conservative MPs were supporting and were supportive of him when he went to the 22 committee this afternoon. And we'll see what the outcome is. I mean, for them to get rid of him now would be an utter disaster.
Yeah, well, though you know perfectly well that getting desks banged in support at the 1922 committee, that only means so much. It's what people really think and what they say afterwards. But you don't need me to tell you that.
No. As I say, you know more about this than I do.
And on the economy, I mean, inflation it came down just a fraction further than people might have expected. But interest rates, they are still sticking where they are till maybe June, and even then, we're looking at a quarter point decrease, followed by maybe another similar quarter point a month or two later. Is that enough? I mean, the public are unconvinced, aren't they? Look at all the opinion polls. The government's doing a good enough job on the economy.
Well, I can't predict, even though I was interested to see the Times shadow Bank of England representative suggested that they're not going to come down till June. We'll see whether they do. I mean, I can't see any reason why they shouldn't come down now with inflation at the level it is. It's been on a downward trend. I just think it's stubbornness by the Bank of England, who, by the way, have not covered themselves in glory at all through this whole process, and brings into question of whether they really have got a grip on things. And there's no doubt about it that Rishi inherited a very big economic mess. He's trying to get it under control. He is being successful in certain ways. But the Conservative Party has been so febrile now for 5 or 6 years that it's very difficult for him. And the moment the general public see infighting in a party, they don't like it.
I mean, even you are having to accept there that it looks as if, to many people, including you, the government has not got a proper grip. Are you now one of the pessimists?
No, I think they've got a grip, as I said, on the economy. I think they're trying their very hardest on the immigration issue, which is a big problem. All the initiatives so far have been amazingly not effective. The we're giving a lot of money to France. There's no sign that they're really getting to grips with it. You kind of wonder what officialdom has been doing in the last 5 or 6 years. So I think they've been plagued by some very tricky and not very energetic officialdom. And I think that the sort of continual changing of leadership is a problem. If Rishi and the Conservative Party show, and I'm talking about the MPs, show that they want to govern and are energetic about it, they have a chance. But clearly the polls are indicative. I don't actually believe the polls ever. But and you have seen it, and I've seen it over the years, that they're so often wrong. But there has to be a levelling out, and then there has to be hope. People want hope, and they want to know that there are sunny outcomes. That's what Rishi will have to do in order to win the election.
Yeah, people certainly want hope. Lord Marland, really good to talk to you. Thank you for joining us.